Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we'd do another mixed haul because the stuff is piling up, as you can probably see. Can you see me? Yeah, it's just crazy how much stuff I ended up getting. So, happened was last weekend I sold just over 800, 900, 800, and then 100. So $900 in books and movies, etc. over the weekend. So I had a inflush of a lot of money. So I decided to travel to every thrift store and pawn shop in my city and go on to Gigi and Facebook Marketplace and start picking up stuff that I was a bit hesitant to buy because of cash flow. But when somebody thinks you have very good taste in books and decides to pick up a whole bunch of your books and films and everything that you're selling, then hey, you can translate that money into stuff that you want. So you're getting rid of stuff that you don't want, and you're getting stuff that you do want, and you're doing that at a bit of a markup. So um, it keeps the cash flow going, so you can purchase stuff to resell as well. So anyway, so I have too much stuff to count. So the only thing I can do is just go through it, right? Okay, so I have a bunch of books, uh, more movies than anything else, some books and um, maybe 10 or so CDs as well. So we got a bit of everything. All right, so I don't know where I'm going to put it after I show it to you. So I guess, okay, let's do these ones first. Okay, I also have 3 TV shows. All right, so let's move this around so I can get to all 3 of them all at once rather than just. All right, so I found Matlock seasons 1 to 8, so 1 to 4, and then 5 to 8 in a thrift store, and I found this for $10. All right, so um, I'm going to watch it, and then I'll probably sell it because I don't really keep TV shows. Um, I don't know. I think maybe I'm similar to a lot of other people, but I'll watch a TV show once, and then if it's good, I'll keep it for a bit to see whether I want to watch it again a few years later. But if I think it's an okay show, then I won't keep the discs or whatever because they just take up too much space, right? So um, and if I don't think I'll ever watch it again, okay, I've watched it, I've done that, been there, done that. I'm not going to watch it again because TV shows have movies you can watch over and over again, especially the ones that you really like, because they're an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and uh, they're like a book. You'll reread a book every few years if you really like the book as well, right? But for some reason, TV shows aren't so much that, right? So once you watch the TV show, at least for me, I don't really want to watch the show again unless it is extremely good. Like some of the TV shows I've watched more than once is Cheers, which is like my all-time favorite comedy. Game of Thrones was really good. I really enjoyed The Wire. The Wire was another one that was really good that I watched a few times. And Breaking Bad, another one that's good. Battlestar Galactica, the reimagining one, I watched that twice, but I have no interest in watching Battlestar Galactica again. So, and some Stargate SG-1, I watched that a few times. But usually, what happens is once you've watched the series, you've spent enough time with that series that you probably won't watch it again. All right, so um, so usually when I do pick up, like I watched a few episodes of Matlock when it was out. It was out in like the 80s and 90s. Went from 1986 to 1995, and it has 9 seasons. But I don't know why they don't have the ninth season with this double box set. Cheers came out in two of these type of cases as well. And then they came out with the whole series in once, but they broke it up into 2, and they did the same thing with Frasier, if I remember correctly. But you had all the seasons um, in them if you bought both box sets. This one, there was a season 9, and I don't know if was it ever put onto DVD. I'm not sure. Is there a Matlock? Um, complete series in one set that has season 9. I'm not sure, but I found season 1 to 8, so I'm going to watch season 1 to 8. If it's interesting enough to find season 9, I'll find season 9 um, as well. But anyway, so that's interesting. The next one I found, so I found that for 10. I found this one for 20, and this one was used. This one is new. I found it at a. I discovered. So I went on Kijiji, and this guy was selling this new Schitt's Creek for $15. I went, $15 new? Yeah, that's a steal. So I contacted him, and uh, he said he gave the address for where I come. When I went to that address, it's a video rental store. I'm going, video rental store? When the hell was this? Has this been around and I haven't known about it in a city that I've been living in for 20, almost 30 years now, 25, 30 years now? Um, and I haven't heard of this video rental store, and they sell movies in it as well. So I got a bunch of movies there today, and I got this for 20. Um, this my sister really liked this show. All right, Reba. It stars Reba McNeil, the country singer. She really enjoyed it, so she would watch it a lot when it was on TV. And at the time it was out, I was also helping my sister out because she was separating from her husband, and so I kind of became the surrogate father to her two kids. Anyway, uh, so I was over at her house a lot at that time. Um, so she watched Reba like weekly. I don't know if it went into syndication at that time. I'm not exactly sure of the timeline of Reba, right? But I found it comical enough but I didn't see the whole series. So there's like 125 episodes. So I watched episodes with my sister, but I'd never seen the whole series. And $20 for that, I said, okay, I'll buy it and I'll watch it with my wife, see if she likes it. But the main point of going there is I went for this one because $15 for Schitt's Creek is an extremely good deal. I think maybe that he reduced it because Schitt's Creek was on Netflix or one of the other streaming services. And it's funny how the streaming services dictate the price of physical media a lot. If it's on a streaming service and it's been put out on disc of some sort, then it's usually pretty reasonably priced. But once it goes off a streaming service, you'll see that price shoot up. So I mean, if you want to keep an ear out or uh, of what's coming on to streaming services and going off of streaming services, you can pick up certain stuff at a reasonable price and then charge a little bit more when it goes off the streaming service. It's not on a streaming service anymore, and the only way a person can actually access that show is through physical media. You can usually put up the price than what you paid for it, right? Because it becomes wanted more, right? So things are usually pretty cheap if they're on the streaming services, but once they go off the streaming service, you'll see an increase in the price for them new on Amazon and other places, and in the secondary market as well. But I think maybe this is so cheap because it was on Netflix or whatever. But it's up there with some of the greatest TV shows in Canadian history, comedies or whatever. Schitt's Creek is up there. I mean, how can you not love this guy? Come on, this guy is amazing, right? I think I can remember his name. And there's his son, and anyways, they were in a bunch of movies that were great, and he was on, SCTV. Um, anyway, so Eugene Levy. Anyway, so that show was really funny. It was kind of dry and funny, stark and funny because there wasn't much music playing. If you're used to watching, American sitcoms, there's always music and a laugh track and everything else in 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 the show, and I don't think Schitt's Creek had all that. There was very little music. It was just the actors, right? Um, but it's a funny premise, and it was funny for the time that it lasted. And I did start watching it on Netflix, but um, I have the whole set now, so I can watch it as I want now. I don't have to worry about it going off of Netflix and not being able to see it, right? So that's Reba, Schitt's Creek, and Matlock. Those are the three TV shows I got. All right. So what else did we get here? Okay, let's do this one. All right. All right. So this is The Prince by Machiavelli. You've obviously heard of Machiavelli, right? Anyways, so this is his book or letter that he sent to. I wrote it down his name. So Lorenzo de Medici. The Medici. He was a duke in the Italian, if I remember correctly, the Italian government or whatever, right in the the upper class, the aristocratic class of Italy. And this is Machiavelli's book to him, his letter to him about how his advice on how to run a kingdom or whatever, right, or princedom or whatever, right. Um, and it was put out in the mid 1500s, early 1500s. So, and it's probably the main start of the branch of philosophy, political philosophy, right. So it basically gives a whole bunch of pointers to a prince on how to best run a kingdom or whatever, right? If you're going to be head of the kingdom, this is what you need to do in order to keep power and to influence and have power over the people that you rule, right? And some of it's pretty brutal. Like, for example, he gives it a bunch of different scenarios, like if you come to it by heredity, or if you come to it uh, by usurping, the prince, by violence or whatever, and other situations. There's certain behaviors that you need to take on in order for you to keep in power, and especially if you're a usurper, what you need to do is the person that usurped, you need to kill him. You need to kill every member of his family, and so on and so forth. Some of it's pretty brutal, and that's why, um, it's become, uh, you know, uh, part of the lexicon when you say, well, that's very Machiavellian, right? Machiavellian, meaning, that's pretty like dirty or whatever, you know what I mean? Like underhanded, that kind of thing, right? So, um, but it's basically the start. Like if you have an interest in political philosophy, you're going to read a whole bunch of different books, from Plato's The Republic, from Aristotle's Politics, up to Machiavelli. That's more uh, the modern version of political philosophy. You're going to have Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. You're going to have, like, the political writings of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. You're going to have John Locke, his two treatises on government is another one. There's a bunch of political philosophy that you could read, and this one is, in the least of it, it's really good read. All right, even though it's kind of brutal, some of it, right? But overall, the advice he gives is pretty sound, right? And this is the an Amber. It's called Amber, the publisher that published this book. All right, it's a really nice edition, um, right? And it has nice large headlines, quotes, nice, right? And um, it's binded in the old Chinese fashion, right? There's a Chinese way of the way that the Chinese used to bind books, and this is so they did a kind of like a replica Chinese binding of this, right? So it's really nice. I've read the book, so I think I have a leather bound edition of it already, so I don't really need it. So I'll probably resell it. Every book that I enjoyed reading, I try to find a nice edition, maybe a folio, maybe a Franklin Library leather-bound edition of it, an Easton Press leather-bound, that kind of thing, right? And then I keep it in my library. So if I didn't have this in leather-bound, I would probably keep this because it's a really nice edition. But I'll probably end up selling it since I already have it in my library. Next up is a really nice hardcover of the complete works of William Shakespeare, put out by Oxford. And this sucker is heavy, all right? And it has all of his plays, all right, and it's a really nice edition, expensive edition. And I found this for $4. So it's like 30 pounds. You would have bought it in Great Britain or the UK. It's 40 if you bought it in the US, and it's probably like 50 if you buy it here in Canada, right? So I already have a nice edition. I have like a set, a folio set of three volume box sets of his complete works. So I don't need this either. But for $4, I'm going to pick it up and I'll probably sell it for like 20 or whatever, right? So it'll give me some extra money to buy other stuff, right? So, which is the whole purpose of doing this, right? So that's the complete works of William Shakespeare. I prefer his comedies over all of his writing. Some people prefer his tragedies. I don't hear very many people talk about his histories, though. So, anyways, all right. So that's The Prince. What else do we have? Okay, we have a nice second edition of Beginning Theory, which is an introduction to literary and cultural theory. All right. And this is put out by Manchester Press. It's new. It's beautifully made. It's like a new book, like nobody even read it, right? So, but literary theory and cultural theory is very popular for students in where I live. So I'll resell that book probably pretty easily. All right. So after that, I have 2005, The Human Fly and Other Stories by T.C. Boyle. All right. So T.C. Boyle, a lot of people know about him, but don't know about him. So if you don't know about him, pick him up. He's really good, especially his short stories. The Human Fly is a really good one. They mentioned on the back another one of his classics that the one won the O. Henry Award. O. Henry being like one of the great American short story writers. All right, so and it's called The Love of My Life, and it's in this volume. So if you have not read Boyle and you like short stories, he's also written 16 novels as well. So um, I'm going to read this, is what I'm going to do, in between reading some books, for my book versus movie videos. So when I get the time, I'm going to read this because he intrigues me. I have not read anything by T.C. Boyle yet. So, all right, so that's T.C. Boyle. Then we have 1943, Le Petit Prince, or The Little Prince. All right, this is the original French uh, novel. All right, so by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. It's hard to pronounce his name. Um, anyway, so it is a classic in French literature, a classic in children's literature, and it just tells a story about a little prince who travels around the universe. He ends up being on Earth, and he ends up making the acquaintance of a pilot who ended up crashing his plane in the desert, and he's fixing his plane, and the little prince comes to visit him, talks to him about behavior and a whole bunch of different other things, right? So it's quite an interesting read. It deals with subjects that are, for an adult, it may go over a child's head, but there's enough of this story that has wonder in it that children really love. It has a sense of wonder about it, right? So, and hearing about a little boy who's a prince, and he gets to travel around to different planets, and the different planets have different things on them, is really interesting to kids. So it's a really good book to read your child, and it's usually illustrated very nicely as well. So if you haven't read Le Petit Prince in French, or The Little Prince, the English translation of it, you're missing out, buddy. You should read it. All right. Next up is one of the greatest American plays of all time. All right, up there with oh Edward Albee's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is really good. There's a streetcar named Desire. Is that a play? Or yeah. Anyway, so um, it's Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman from 1949, and this gave Miller the Pulitzer. All right, so um, it's an extremely good uh, book. I'm still looking for a really nice copy of it. I read it in high school and I've read it a few times since, but I haven't been able to find a nice leather-bound edition or maybe a folio or whatever of it yet. So, but this basically tells the story of Willie Loman, who's a traveling salesman, and his depressing life with his two sons and his wife. Um, and It's all about dreams being shattered, and you know, after reading this, you're probably not going to be in a happy mood. You're going to be in a depressed mood. Um, but it is a really enjoyable read in that melancholy sense, right? So, um, what else to say about it? Oh, so this picture is basically of Dustin Hoffman because there's a film. They made a film of this back in the 90s. It was like 1995 or was it 19? Yeah, no, 1985 in the 80s. Um, and that's him from the film as Willie Loman, right? So if you don't want to read the play, you can if you go searching around because Dustin Hoffman does a really good job in that film because I have seen that film, right? So um, from 1985, Death of a Salesman, starring um, Dustin Hoffman. All right, so that's Death of a Salesman. Next up is another Shakespeare book, and this time it's Macbeth. I spoke about these No Fear Shakespeares before, right? So I always, whenever I find them, I always pick them up because they sell really well, because people are a bit intimidated by the language of Shakespeare, the Old English. And what this does is it gives you the original play on one side and then the play in modern English on the other. So you can read how Shakespeare wrote it, and then you can read the modern translation of it, right? Even though both are English. Anyway, so they're really good, and they have editions of many of Shakespeare's plays. I've found probably 8 or 9 of these different plays, so so they're really easy to resell as well. So that's what I'll probably do with that one. Then I have a travel book from 1900. It's called Sailing Alone Around the World, and Joshua Slocum got in his sloop, which is a type of boat, that kind of boat, all right, and he named it. What did he name it? I wrote it down. Spray. He named it Spray, and he was the first person to circumnavigate the globe by himself in a sailboat. All right, so it's a really interesting read if you haven't read it. If you like travel literature, you're really going to enjoy this if you haven't read it already. And I don't know what else to say about it. If you like travel literature, so it basically just it's him writing about his travels around the world, right? And this is what is it called? A Kahneman. This is a series of books you can actually find. There's a library of this type of book where you'll have that type of spine and this type of dust jacket. And the books are small. They're like paperback size, but they're hardcovers. And there's a whole slew of them, all right? And they're fun to collect, but I don't collect them because, I'm collecting the Modern Library and Everyman Library and all that. So I don't really want to add more because I just don't have the room, right? But there's nothing wrong with collecting these. They do not take up a lot of space, and they really are well constructed books, right? So Kahneman, all right, Conemann, Kahneman, all right. Anyway, so that's Sailing Around the World, all right. I was published in 1900, all right. So next up, I found this book, all right, at a thrift store for $2, and it's a biography of Che Guevara, all right. So Che Guevara is a popular person. You can't walk down the streets uh, without seeing somebody with a Che Guevara T-shirt on, right? So, um, but it's interesting to actually get to know the man himself and what he did. Basically, he's Argentinian, if I remember correctly, um, and he ended up joining Castro in the overthrow of Batista back in the 1940s, right? And then he left after working in the government with um, training his armies and doing other things, other ministerial work in Castro's government. He left and he went to Bolivia and did the exact same thing in Bolivia that he did in Cuba. Tried to overthrow the government, but he was captured and basically executed. Right. So it's a very interesting read. He's a very interesting person. There is a reason why You know, uh, he's so popular, you know, anti-establishment popularity, the T-shirts and everything, but he has just become, you know, like a T-shirt. You know what I mean? So it would it would behoove you to get to know the actual guy and what he did, um, rather than just wear his T-shirt, not know why, right? So anyway, so that's Che Guevara. All right. Next up is a 1961 novel called Cat and Mouse by Gunter Grass. This is uh, the second book in the Danzig trilogy. All right, so I have not read this, but the Danzig trilogy is one of the most popular German um, books, you know, in the history of German literature. So I don't know why I haven't read it, but it sells well. So so whenever I find Grass, especially the Danzig one or all three of the Danzig books, they do have a trilogy that has all three of the books together. Um, in a nice hardcover version of this, it's white, almost the exact same design. Um, and supposedly the books are extremely good to read. So, but I have not read them yet. All right. So next up is Virtual War by Michael Ignatieff. Came out in 2000. 2000? Yeah. Um, and it's basically about the war in Kosovo. All right. So Ignatieff is a Canadian intellectual. Him and John Ralston Saul are probably, you know, the best that Canada's produced in the last, you know, couple of decades when it comes to interesting reading, as well as, you know, on politics, current events, philosophy, that kind of thing. Um, and he's written a ton of books. He also was, you know, like leader of the Liberal Party for like 3 or 4 years. Was, you know, the he never became prime minister, but he was, you know, the official opposition head of the official opposition when from 2008 to 2011. But then he went back. I mean, he's educated at Harvard and all that. So he's a smart guy and basically traveled to, you know, Eastern Europe, um, and wrote about stuff in Eastern Europe. And this is one of the results of that, which basically is in real wars, whole nations are mobilized, soldiers fight and die, victories are won. In virtual war, hostilities may not even be declared. The combatants are strike pilots and computer programmers. The watching nation is a television audience, and instead of victory, there is an uncertain endgame. Kosovo in 1999 moved armed aggression into this new phase. Michael Ignatieff examines this strange remote type of warfare through the eyes of its key players. Probing, challenging, and profound, this book raises fundamental questions about warfare and human values as we confront a new millennium. All right, so basically, it's not let's send our army and let's go fight. It's a virtual war. And if you haven't read anything about virtual war, you may really enjoy this book. All right. Um, so that's virtual war. Next up is Arthur Ransom's 1930 novel, Swallows and Amazons, which is a series of books. And this one is the first one. I have not read it, but it's a children's novel. All right. And it's about basically a war between uh, the swallows, not the birds, but the swallow is the last name of this family, and the Amazons, which is another group of people. So, but it's a children's book, so I'm not sure how they deal with, you know, the fighting between these two families or whatever. But it's a classic, so we'll have to see if I ever end up reading it. Have you read Swallows and Amazons? If you have, I picked it mostly up because I'm going to resell it. And I know that that title can sells pretty easily. So, um, and did you enjoy it if you read it? Did you read it to your kids? Is it more of a young adult novel than a children's novel? But it comes off as a children's novel, right? So anyway, so that's Swallows and Amazons. Next up is an 1871 novel by George Eliot. All right, and it's called Middlemarch. All right, so it's actually everybody. This is actually a female writing, all right? Her name is Marianne Evans, but she went by the pen name of George Eliot, and I think mostly everybody knows that. And what the reason is, sometimes women won't be taken seriously, so they write with pen names of men's back in the day, right? Men's pen names. Anyways, this is a nice hardcover edition of of uh, of Middlemarch, which is basically, most of the writing, especially the English writing back in these days, like in the 1800s, is about family put into circumstances that may not be pleasant, and infidelity and things like that are extremely looked down on because people are more churchgoers back then. They're more structured with family as their center, and that kind of thing. So, like whereas in now getting a divorce is not a big deal. Back then, a divorce is like a scandal. Being caught in an affair without your husband is another scandal. So a lot of those books cover that type of subject matter back in those days because it's titillating reading and it's interesting reading, that type of thing. It's not about space or war as much as it is about the family dynamic, and maybe you end up being rich one day and poor the next, and you end up on the street or begging, or you have to go get an abortion, and abortions are not looked at positively back then, or all these interesting things that happens to family because of the strict nature of society of those days in the UK or whatever, right? So most of those books, but George Eliot is up there with Jane Austen or the Brontes, or all those about writing about either love or. But George Eliot seems more masculine. Maybe it's just the influence of her name being male or whatever. But I mean, her best novel is Silas Marner. If you haven't read that book, you read that book. That's a quite enjoyable book. But this one is as well. So, and Penguin put out a group of nice editions. They put out those paperbacks. It's mostly paperbacks, right? But then every once in a while they'll come out with a series of books in a nice edition. And this is a nice, it's almost like, it's really smooth, almost nice hardcovers. Okay, Daddy's coming up in a second. All right, so that's George Eliot's Middlemarch. All right, next up is the last book, which is good, and it is Dante's Inferno, which is the first book of, what was it called? The Divine Comedy. So you have, first book is called Inferno, which is basically Dante going around with the Latin poet, the ancient Latin poet Virgil. All right, the guy that wrote the Aeneid. Aeneid, is that how you pronounce it? Anyway, so he travels around hell with Virgil, and there's two more books to this Divine Comedy, and it's a very large poem basically. All right, but when it's translated in English, it's um, seems less poetry and more prose. But anyway, so it's an Italian masterpiece. It's probably the greatest Italian piece of literature ever written. All right, so the first book is, like I said, Inferno. The second is Purgatory, where Dante goes into purgatory, and then the third is where he goes to heaven. So it's called Paradise. All right. So these three books are studied by students, and they're very easy to resell. So, all right. So that are all the books. All right. So now we did all the TV shows. We did all the books. Let's do some CDs. All right. And then we'll get to the S load of movies that I have as well. All right. So first up, okay. So when I do have a very, very large CD collection, and I'm going through it. I've made about I think eight videos so far. So probably covered maybe 150, 160 CDs so far. Um, but I also will resell CDs that are good, and I have a pretty good taste on what people will buy. And in those videos, I mentioned what I think are like the greatest albums of all time. So I'll go through my library, and then I'll hit one maybe in every 10 or 20 that I consider one of the greatest albums of all time. So I continue doing that with these type of videos where I'm going over CDs as well, right? So, all right, so this is Prefab Sprouts, Steve McQueen. It's a British pop band from the 80s. Um, and they're one of the greats. And this album is one of the greatest pop albums of all time. All right. So if you have not listened to this album, I highly suggest that you do. Now, if you're in the States, you may find this not called Steve McQueen because, you know, they named it Steve McQueen in the UK, but when they started, when they put it out in the US, they were worried about, lawsuits from the family of Steve McQueen or whatever. So um, they changed it. What did they change it to? I wrote it down because I knew I was going to forget it, right? Uh, Two Wheels Good. All right. So this came out in 1985, and it's one of the great pop albums of all time. And one of the greatest songs of all time in that type of thing is, what is it called here? When love's when love breaks down. That is a really really enjoyable song. All right. So, but the whole album is great. So if you haven't listened to this album, I highly suggest you do. All right. So that's Prefab Sprouts, Steve McQueen's. All right. And again, another album. This one came out in 1997, and it is Radiohead's third and greatest album. All right. So um, before Radiohead came out in the 90s, when you would look at all the top lists of all the different bands of what the greatest, let's say, 100 albums are of all time, you always see the Beatles at the top, right? Well, it took, 30, 40 years, but this band and this album uh, usurped a lot of the Beatles at number one, and a lot of people consider this the greatest album of all time. All right, so some people may say it's Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, maybe Beggar's Banquet by the Rolling Stones, Revolver or Sergeant Pepper's um, by the Beatles, or Pet Sounds by um, uh, the Beach Boys, maybe Natty Dread by Bob Marley. Anyways, you get the idea. But this one came out, and the one before it, the Bends, put them on the map, and this one just killed it for them. This is an extremely good album. All right, if you have not listened to this album, I'm not sure where you've been, but it's one of the greatest albums of all time, and considered by a lot of people, especially those growing up and listening to music in the mid to late '90s. Um, this is their seminal album, and it's always put at number one by them, right? So it's a little bit, I'm older when I listen to that, but it blew me away. And one song on it that I would um, consider, like, I extremely like depressing songs, like really really sad songs. All right, so. And there's a list that I have that I keep adding to of these great songs that are just so depressing that, like, if you're just in a sad mood and you want a cathartic release of sadness, and you listen to a whole bunch of sad songs in a row, and it kind of gets you out of that morose or melancholic feeling, right? So on this, there's one song on this one that is that, and it's exit exit music for a film. Listen to that. That is a very depressing song. All right, so that's OK Computer. Next up is another one of the greatest albums of all time. So we're doing three in a row here. All right. So when I went out and I found these albums, I was like, wow, I got it. But these are all in my collection, right? So this is a 1975 Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen. It's probably the critics' choice of his greatest album. All right. It has Thunder Road on it, 10th Avenue Freeze Out, Born to Run, Jungle Land. All right. So extremely good uh, music. But growing up, me in the 80s, this was a little bit before me. I mean, I wasn't not born when this came out, but the zone for me would be Born in the USA would be for him, would be Born in the USA. That album would be, and it is his best-selling album because he was huge in the 1980s, even though a lot of his best music came out in the 70s, right? So, but Born in the USA, it was up there with like Michael Jackson's Thriller. It was just an extremely great album with a lot of great songs on it that sold in the millions, right? So, all right, so that's Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. All right. Next up is Hot Rocks by the Rolling Stones, which is basically a compilation album. double album. All right, of their hits or singles or whatever from 1964 to 1971. So it has songs like "Time Is on My Side," "Satisfaction," "Paint It Black," "Under My Thumb," "Ruby Tuesday," "Let's Spend the Night Together," "Jumpin' Jack Flash," "Street Fighting Man," "Sympathy for the Devil," "Honky Tonk Woman," and so on and so forth. "Give Me Shelter." It's ridiculous how many hits this band has and how many great albums they have, right? So they produce a ton of great music, all right? Um, and this is just one example of it, all right? So I'm not big on compilation albums. A lot of times bands will put them out after a couple of albums, and you're going, why? Just like to make extra money, I guess. I don't know, but you know, I'm of the opinion that you need to put out at least 4 or 5 albums before you put out a greatest hits or a best of type of compilation. Then I won't buy it anyways. I'd rather have the original, your original albums than a couple of songs off of each, right? So, but that's just me. So, but every once in a while you get a band where sometimes you will buy, they have so much music or a lot of the music, um, they have enough songs to make a really really great like compilation, like the singles by the Police or Legend by Bob Marley, that kind of thing. The Rolling Stones, this one is really good. All right. Anyway, but usually I avoid compilation discs. I would rather have the actual albums themselves. Anyway, so that's the Rolling Stones Hot Rocks. All right. Next up is one of the great guitarists of all time. And this is his third album. It's called Wired, and the name of the man is Jeff Beck. All right, and he plays some really good guitar on this. If you like, it's all instrumental. He doesn't sing. Nobody sings on it. It's basically instrumental guitar music. So if that's up your alley, you're really going to enjoy this if you haven't come across it yet. All right, so that's came out in 1975. It's called Wired by Jeff Beck. All right, and now we'll get to another album, which is one of the greatest albums of all time, and they were contemporaries of Prefab Prefab Spout, and that's the Smiths. But these guys are the greatest 80s pop group coming out of England in the 1980s. There's nobody better than these guys, and this is their best album. The Queen is Dead came out in 1986, and it's just chock full of amazing, amazing songs. Morrissey and Jeff Marr, I keep forgetting the guitarist, Johnny Marr, not Jeff Marr. Bleh. Johnny Marr wrote the music, and him and Morrissey wrote the songs. And Morrissey's voice. If you ever listen to Bell and Sebastian, there are a plethora of British singers that have those saccharine voices. Like um, I don't want to call them female voices. They're not really female voices, but they got a higher tone to them, and they're not rough. They're beautiful. You know what I mean? Morrissey is one of them, and he really shines on this album. And this album is a sarcastic, sarcastically beautiful album. All right, so if you haven't listened to "The Queen Is Dead," one of the greatest albums of all time, in my top 100 easily, and you should listen to it. All right, so that's the Smiths. "The Queen Is Dead." All right, next up is another one of the greatest. Although I wouldn't put it in the greatest. I think their two albums probably are Led Zeppelin 2 and Led Zeppelin 4 are probably their two greatest albums that I would add to a top 100 list. But this is their first album. All right, came out in 1969. That's Led Zeppelin 1. Most people call it Led Zeppelin 1. It's the one that has "Good Times, Bad Times," "Baby, I'm Gonna Leave You," "You Shook Me," "Dazed and Confused," "Your Time Is Gonna Come." Basically, every one of the songs that are on this album. They're basically, um, Jimmy Page wrote most of the songs. All right, and there's 3 of them on. I think there's a Muddy Waters song on this, or is it a Howling Wolf song? And some Willie Dixon on it as well. So I think there's 3 of them, 3 songs that they got from American blues musicians, and redid the songs or whatever, right? So um, extremely good album, but I wouldn't put it in the top 100 but I would put this one. All right, so that's Led Zeppelin 1. Here's Led Zeppelin 2. This came out in 1969 as well. And this is my all-time favorite Led Zeppelin album. And I would put this in a top 10 list of all the greatest albums of all time. It would be in the top 10, if not top 10, top 20. All right, so um, this has a whole lot of love, but it has the Lemon song, Thank You, Heartbreaker, Livin', Lovin' Made. But it has my all-time favorite. It's my all-time favorite album, and it's all my all-time favorite song is on this album by Led Zeppelin, and that's "Ramble On." I really like that song. Um, it gives you that feeling of go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, kind of thing. And a reference of Lord of the Rings can't be bad either, right? So anyway, so this is Led Zeppelin 2. If you have not listened to this album, yeah, is there anybody ever that hasn't listened to this album? But if you haven't listened to it, um, you'll be blown away. All right, so that's Led Zeppelin 2. All right. Next up is an album I have not listened to, but he's one of my favorite musicians, and that is Mike Oldfield because of Tubular Bells and, Tubular Bells 2, Tubular Bells 3, and some other stuff he's did. This one is guitars, where he basically has a whole album where the only music you'll hear are different guitars, and he puts them together in a way that it sounds like a band, if you know what I mean. Anyways, um, I have not listened to it. That's what I get when I did the read up on this album. Um, when I was at the thrift store and I saw it, I went, Mike Oldfield, got to pick this up. All right. So if you haven't listened to Tubular Bells, which is his greatest album, listen to that. That is a really, really great album. All right. So this one is guitars, and it came out in 1999, and it is his 19th album. 19 albums from that gentleman. All right. So any more? Yeah. Okay. So now we got the Strawbs. All right. If you ever heard, this is a 1970s band, and this is Hero and Heroine. It came out in 1974. All right. And it's progressive rock, basically. All right. I have not listened to it, but I've probably heard it. I've listened to thousands upon thousands of albums, and I can't remember every album that I listened to, so I may have listened to it, but I don't have this in my collection. And when I saw it, I looked it up in my list, and I didn't have it. I went, oh, I got to pick this up and listen to it. All right. So supposedly, the way that they use the mellotron in this is supposed to be really good. All right. So that's some progressive rock with the Strawbs. All right. Next up after that is Pat Metheny without his group. All right. And this came out in 1992, and it's called Secret Story. And I think this won a Grammy, if I remember correctly. All right. And if you haven't listened to Pat Metheny, he's some of the greatest jazz from this guy. All right. And if you love jazz, you probably already heard of him. All right. So I'm not going to get into it. We're we're uh, we're moving along pretty quickly, so let's keep doing it. And we have, last but not least, 1964's Hard Day's Night by the Beatles on CD. This is the one that has Hard Day's Night, If I Fell, and I Love Her, Tell Me Why, Can't Buy Me Love, and so on and so forth. It's probably not, like, if you were to list their greatest albums, Revolver would be probably number one, but I would prefer Sergeant Pepper probably, and then Revolver. But then you have, like Rubber Soul is another one. The White Album is another one. This one's kind of just below those, right? So Abbey Road, it would be above this one as well, but it's up there. It's better than Yellow Submarine, let's say. Um, and it's called A Hard Day's Night by the Beatles. I don't have to explain the Beatles. Everybody knows the Beatles, right? All right. So those are all the CDs. All right. So how much was it? 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 CDs, and of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 were some of the greatest. 5 of them were in the top 100 albums of all time. So can't go wrong with that, right? All right. So now we will get into the movies. All right. And I bought some stuff from a private sale new. I ordered some stuff as well. Um, and I found a bunch of stuff. I found 3 or 4 at that new uh, movie rental place that I didn't know existed, and I got some private stuff off some off a gentleman, and then I found a whole bunch of stuff at some thrift stores and some pawn shops. All right, so let's go through it, and then we'll be all done. All right, so here we go. All right, first thing I bought this I bought new for $20, and it's a Neon Genesis Evangelion. All right, one of the classic, great anime um, series, 26 episodes. All right, I bought it new. It's new in a nice slipcase, and this was on Japanese television in the 90s, from 1995, 1996. It's directed by, I wrote it down so I could read it rather than try to pronounce it, Hideaki Anno. All right, and it's basically about this boy who ends up getting into these mega fighting things, and fighting what were called these aliens called the Angels, if I remember correctly. And it's a really good series. If you like anime, if you like cartoons, if you like animation, um, you should pick this up, because this is really good. And it's 26 episodes and extremely good anime. All right, so that's Neon Genesis Evangelion. All right. Next up is DVD trilogy of Back to the Future. I don't really have to explain much about Back to the Future. It was Michael J. Fox's greatest set of films, with Christopher Lloyd as the professor, all right, or the doctor, I guess. The professor? What did he call himself? It was a professor, right? Anyway, so it's been years since I've seen this, but uh, basically, the first one is really good. The second one is okay. The third one is okay, but the first one is one of the greatest, American films ever made, right? And one of the greatest of the 80s. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. You're missing out, all right? So that's Back to the Future. I already have that on Blu-ray in my collection, so I'll probably just resell it. I also found this from the same gentleman that I got the anime from, and this is basically all the films on Blu-ray of Mission Impossible. So from 1996 to 2018, we get to see, how many films are there? One, two, three, four, six films, right? Uh, 6 films starring Tom Cruise, which is the movies based off the 60s British television show Mission Impossible, right? So they're very good films. I really enjoyed them. All right, so when I saw this for $20, I picked it up new. All right, now add that to my collection. I can get rid of all the individual DVDs or Blu-rays that I have of it, and just have one, this space instead of like that space or whatever, right? So, all right, next up after that is I also bought this off the gentleman, which is all five films of Phantasm, with the tall man. All right, one of the classic horror franchises. All right, that isn't, a slasher. He's like an undertaker, and he touches dead people, and they shrink into these dwarfs, and then he's going to try to take over the world. And there's 5 films about it, right? The first one is the best, obviously, and then after that, it kind of goes downhill. But it's nice to have it all in one set, so I don't have a whole bunch of different individual ones. I can have them all in one DVD case. All right, and that was $20 as well. All right? So that's Phantasm. And then I found uh, 2 new Steelbook DVDs of 5 or 6 films in the Die Hard franchise. Uh, this is one of them. All right, it's new. I put it in a plastic bag. Nice Steelbook. I do have them. I don't know why I bought it. To be honest, I thought they were Blu-rays. I thought they were Blu-ray. They were like $10 each, and I thought they were Blu-ray Steelbooks. So even though I have this collection and DVD, like the whole collection, all the movies on DVD and in Blu-ray, um, I like Steelbooks. So whenever I see a film that I like in a Steelbook, I'll add it because it looks nice on the shelf, right? So it adds a little bit more prestige to the shelves that you have. Right? Anyway, so um, if they're reasonably priced. But then when I went into the car afterwards, and was like, hey, this looks too big to be a Blu-ray, and then yeah, it's a DVD. So I ended up buying the 2 of them for $20. Um, this one is Live Free or Die Hard, and the other one was the first Die Hard. It's in here somewhere, but I watched it last night, so it might still be upstairs. All right, but I also found this Blu-ray Steelbook of one of the great '90s films by Richard Linklater, and that is Dazed and Confused. I can get rid of my regular Blu-ray now and have a nice Steelbook instead. Um, But this also is part of the Criterion collection. I have it on DVD in the Criterion collection. I have it on Blu-ray in my director's area of my collection in Richard Linklater, and now I have the steelbook of it. So I guess I must like this film if I keep buying it, right? So, all right. So that's the steelbook of Dazed and Confused. If you want to take have you seen it before? I'm assuming you have. It doesn't have the J. What do you call it? The J thing for it. You know, the backing, because with a steelbook they never put any writing on it. They have this J sleeve, I guess you call it, that they glue to the back of it. People take it off and throw it away. I wish they would keep it though. So that's what it looks like as a digital code. So I'll just flip that over. Do you get into digital codes? Do you have digital codes so you can watch movies online with every device wherever you are? Some people get into it. I don't really do that much. That's what the inside looks like. So, all right. So I will sell the regular Blu-ray and keep this Steelbook Blu-ray in my collection. All right, so that's the Steelbook of Dazed and Confused. Then I found this National Film Board short called The Danish Poet. Now, the National Film Board, um, I had just done a video of the letter M of my film collection, and I came across an M in there, and I said, National Film Board. It's the Canadian National Film Board have made some really good films, and they're renowned around the world for some great animated films and short films. And this is one of them. It's called The Danish Poet. All right, and I think this won an Academy Award, but don't quote me. I'll put it here. I'll put it down, but I think it did. It's only a 15-minute animated film, but it has a really good reputation, just like the National Film Board has a really good reputation. So if you do come across DVDs or Blu-rays that have National Film Board on it, pick them up, because usually, you'll be blown away by a lot of the stuff that they do. Some of it is a bit underwhelming until you watch it a few times, but then you're kind of going, yeah, this is kind of out of the ordinary, because whoever sits down and watches a 15 or 20-minute film, you know what I mean? Or but the NFB are famous for that type of stuff, right? So, all right, so that's the Danish Poet. Then I found this one, which is a film from 1977 called Sleeping Dogs. All right, and I think this is an Australian film, because it has that logo thing here. They're usually on Australian DVDs and Blu-rays. Is that so? This may have came like from Australia. I may have found it, and it's an Australian film. So usually it'd have the region on the back. It's region 4. So what is region 4? Is that Australia? I'd have to look that up. Anyway, so this is basically a film by um, an action thriller. I have not seen it, but it's like the government takes over, it becomes a fascist state, if I remember correctly. Anyways, it stars Sam Neill, and Sam Neill makes his name in this. This is how it became. But Sam Neill's best film, I don't know, I haven't seen this, so maybe this is Sam Neill's best film, but I really like Dead Calm as a film that I saw Sam Neill in. Like uh, the film on the boat with is it Nicole Kidman? I think it's Nicole Kidman with him. But that film was really good. I have it in my collection, but I haven't watched it in years. But that's where I knew Sam Neill. That and Event Horizon, I think, was another film that I saw him in. Right. So, but this, if you look at the back of it, right, you know, as the cities, oh, not Australia, New Zealand. Only Westerners confuse New Zealand and Australia, right? So as the cities of New Zealand are torn apart by civil anarchy and economic chaos, a, a political family man, Smith, flees his shattered marriage to live alone in the country. When he is falsely accused of being a saboteur, Smith becomes an unwitting pawn in a desperate battle between guerrilla resistance fighters and the ruthless armies of the right-wing government. The legendary Warren Oates co-stars in this tense thriller produced and directed by Roger Donaldson. And it's part of his collection, the Roger Donaldson collection, right? Um, and I collect him as a director. So when I saw Roger Donaldson on the top of this one, I went, cool, because, you know, Sleeping Dogs, I didn't hear about this film, right? So Sleeping Dogs made history as the first New Zealand film feature ever shown in American theaters. So I'm going to watch that. I think it's going to be pretty good. Have you seen Sleeping Dogs? What did you think of it? Let me know in the comments. All right. So next up is another DVD, Noise Noise is Off, which is directed by Peter Bogdanovich, another Peter Bogdanovich film that I'm adding to my collection. So I really need to fit him in somewhere over here in my directors section of it, because they're all scattered all over the place in my film by title, alphabetical order by title section. So this is screamingly funny. It has Carol Burnett, and if you ever watch the Carol Burnett show, if you haven't watched it even now, like what, like 50 years later or whatever, it's still freaking hilarious. And Tim Conway is just nuts in it. All right, Harvey Korman, those guys. But in this one, you have Christopher Reeve, the man who played Superman. You have Michael Caine, all right, and you have Carol Burnett. And this is based off I think, a Tony winning. This hilariously sexy all-star comedy promises to be an entertaining treat you're sure to love. All right, so because originally it's a play by Michael Michael Frayn, um, and then they, made a film of it. And a lot of plays do transition really well uh, to low-budget film because it's only on a stage, right? So you just do a similar thing in the film, but not actually on stage. You know what I mean? But they usually you don't have to spend a huge amount of money on plays that transition into films, right? So, and they're usually really good because with a play, you need a guy that can write. All right, you need a guy that's really good at writing and really good because all the action is going to be happening in one area, um, and there's not you're not going to be flying in an airplane somewhere. You're not going to be, you know, not going to be all over the world. There's not going to be guns flying and cars crashing and everything like that. It's everything. So it has to be, dramatic. It has to be really funny, really, really dramatic, right? So if you can get writers that do that, and then it's very easy to transition that into you know, a really good film, right? So, all right. So next up, I have a documentary on Woodstock: 3 Days of Peace and Music, the director's cut. So this film came out in 1974, and it's about Woodstock. If you haven't heard about that concert, look it up. Everybody knows it's one of the greatest rock concerts ever made, ever shown, produced, attended. All right. The lineup in that is just like a who's who of 60s and 70s artists and bands, right? So, um, anyways, so they made a film about it, and then this one came out. This is a rehashing of the film. They improved it or whatever, um, and reissued it in 1994. All right, so the best is better. The Academy Award-winning Woodstock by wide consensus, the best concert film ever made, has never looked or sounded better than in this director-approved edition with its sights restored and its sounds revitalized. All right, it has 40 minutes more of you know filming or whatever. Anyway, so that's Woodstock. I sound bored by it. No, it's just I'm tired and I'm going through a lot of stuff here. All right, um, I don't really collect concert DVDs or concert Blu-rays, but I will wholeheartedly collect DVD, Blu-ray documentaries on music or on bands. I really enjoy those. I just don't like the live concerts much. I'd rather listen to a CD than have my eyes watching. I'd rather just listen because they're playing music, which is an oral medium. It's not a visual medium, right? So, all right. So now I have the original King Kong vs. Godzilla from 1962. It's a Japanese kaiju film, obviously, right? And it's directed by Ishiro Honda, who did all the Godzillas back at this time. And this one, he takes on King Kong. And I just recently saw the updated version of this, uh, and I have not seen this one. So when I see this, I'll compare the two in my head and see which was better, right? All right. Next up after that is par exemple of what I just said about Woodstock. Here's No Direction Home by Bob Dylan, Martin Scorsese film about Bob Dylan, his life between 1961 and 1966. All right. So supposedly this is an extremely good film. So I have not seen it yet, so I will watch it. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Are you a fan of Bob Dylan? You know, speaking of great albums, in the top 10, you always have a Bob Dylan album. My favorite is, what's my favorite Bob Dylan album? It's the double album. What was the name of that album? I can't remember now. I'll put it here. Has his face on it. It's a double album. Has my favorite song by him, which is Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat, uh, which is not one that usually people say is. But the first time I listened to that album, um, and I heard that song, it made me laugh. Like, put a really big smile on my face. Just picturing that leopard skin pillbox hat, right? So, extremely good song. It cracked me up. So I became a fan of Bob Dylan from that song. Blonde on Blonde is the name of the album. Anyway, so there's a documentary by Scorsese who does very good. He also did one on the band, which was the backing band for Bob Dylan at one time. So he did one on Bob Dylan and did one on the band, right? So um, he's a big fan of Bob Dylan, Scorsese. I mean, all right. Next up is one of Robert De Niro's early films called Hi Mom, directed by Brian De Palma, who's one of my all-time favorite directors. His film Body Double is one of my favorite all-time. If I was put the greatest, ones that I enjoy the most, which also I think are great. People talk about Brian De Palma with, Scarface or whatever, but I really, really like. He was De Palma was a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock, and the films that the kind of like odes to Alfred Hitchcock I really enjoy, and Body Double is one of them that is extremely good. But this one I have not seen, so it's early De Niro and early Brian De Palma. So let's see if it's any good. Right? It's basically actually there was a film before this one. I can't remember what. Did I write it down? Um, yeah, it was called Greetings in 1968. So, um, and he played the same character in this film. All right. So, he plays John Rubin. All right. But I'm not sure what the film was about. Alive, amusing, interesting, and inventive. Hi Mom establishes Brian De Palma as a formidable director and premier social satirist, witty, incisive, and starring Robert De Niro in one of his earliest roles. Hi Mom is a funny movie of enormous exuberance. Doesn't say anything about what the film is about, though. All right, so that's Hi Mom. Next up is four film favorites: The Thriller Collection, Halle Berry's Gothica, Queen of the Damned, Dreamcatcher, the Stephen King book remake, and Ghost Ship. None of these films are great. They're all okay. I picked this up because I'm going to resell it. Um, this one here, Queen of the Damned, uh, it's one of the few films that the soundtrack is much better than the actual film. And the soundtrack I would put up there with all the great sound. Like, if you do a list of, let's say, the top 20 soundtracks of all time, I would put Queen of the Damned as one of those soundtracks, especially if you like, like dark, heavy, kind of, heavy metal music, rock music, hard rock music. Queen of the Damned is a really good soundtrack. All right. So that's four film thriller collection. All right. So I'm running out of space. Things are stacking up too high here. All right. So now we have a 1973 film, That Man Bolt, which is basically a blaxploitation film starring Fred Williamson. All right, and whenever I find a um, blaxploitation film, they're difficult to find, a lot of them. So whenever I come across one, I'll grab it, even if I have to pay $5, $6, $7 for it. Right. So I think I bought this for $3 though. All right, it's basically it's kind of a mix of blaxploitation and like kung fu or karate films, like martial arts films. And so they kind of mixed the two in it. And I watched this when I was a young person. All right, I was over 10, but I wasn't a teenager yet, so maybe 11 or 12 years old. Maybe I saw this film. So I don't know the exact everything. All I knew was cool because I saw these tough men doing karate, and I really enjoyed karate at the time, or kung fu or whatever, right? So anyway, so this is That Man Bolt, all right, starring Fred Williamson from 1973, all right, directed by David Lowell Rich and Henry Levin, all right. All right, so next up is an Ang Lee film. Ang Lee film from 2007. It's called Lust, Caution, all right. I've seen this film, but I don't remember it, so I'm not sure how great it is. But I collect Ang Lee films. I enjoy his films. Um, so I'm going to add this one to my collection. Have you watched this? Because I watched it, but I can't remember it exactly. Uh, I'm not sure if it's good or not. All right. Next up after that is The Time of Your Life, um, starring James Cagney. Front Row Features, which is, I think, is a Canadian distributor, because I see them around a lot. But usually the quality of the films from Front Row, it's a low budget type of production or whatever. So I'm not sure how clear this film will be, but James Cagney supposedly did a really, really good job in this film, and every film that I watch James Cagney, he does a good job. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in this film, all right, because I haven't seen it yet. All right. So that's from 1948, and it's a comedy drama directed by H.C. Potter. All right. All right. So next up is Pumpkin, which is a film I wouldn't. Now, most of the time when I pick up films, I usually do it by director, because the reason why that is, as I explained in previous videos, is that the aim of getting to watch a good film and trying to reduce the amount of bad films you watch to get to a good film uh, is the likelihood is higher if you end up picking up films that you haven't seen, but by directors that you have seen. All right, so if you end up watching a film that you really enjoyed, you find out who the director is and pick up another film by him. If you really enjoyed that one, then you're probably going to enjoy most of his films. So there is no like watching bad films when you're watching films from directors that you enjoy, right? So, but every once in a while, like people like certain actors as well, and they will pick up films because of the actor, and that's hit and miss, because some films, if the director is good, the writer is good, the producer is good, then the actor will be good as well. But if the script is shit, I mean, the actor will do their best to make it come alive, and a lot of them can do that. But still, if the story is crap, the movie's crap. It doesn't matter what actor you have in, it's still going to be crap, right? Um, so an actor is more of an enhancement to a film. It will make or break your film and make your film amazing where it could have only be good or whatever, right? Um, so people do collect by actor sometimes films. Certain actors that they enjoy, they'll go collect all their films. And one of those for me is Christina Ricci, and this is Pumpkin, and this is basically her. She's a college student who ends up starting to date um, a handicapped guy, right? So, and it's supposed to be really funny, but she's got a magnetism in a lot of her films that remind me of like Elizabeth Taylor and some others. I just, I just really enjoy watching her on film, right? So everything from when she played Wednesday, I think her name was, from the Addams Family, and she was in Monster, uh, and Snake Moan, and so many others. Anyways, every film I watch with her in it, she's got some magnetism about her um, that I quite enjoy watching. So, um, Christina Ricci in Pumpkin. All right. So, um, uh, The Keys of the Kingdom from 1944. All right. How Green Was My Valley. All right. From 1941. And All About Eve from 1950. Three of the 20th Century Fox studio classics. All right. number one, number three, and number 39. All right, so I'm going to add these to my collection. It'll bring up uh, um, my Fox Studio Classics up to probably like maybe 15 of them I have now. Um, anyways, this is probably Betty Davis's greatest film. Um, she plays a really famous actress in this film that's getting older, and um, Anne Baxter plays a rival of hers, and there's like a rivalry between, and she's kind of going out of her career, and Baxter's kind of coming into her career, and anyways, there's some interesting stuff that goes on in that film. All right, so that's extremely good, and Betty Davis is really good in it. All right, so How Green Was My Valley. All right, um, this one, Best Picture over Citizen Kane and The Maltese Falcon. So probably pretty good. I have not seen it. Um, so when I finally watch it, let's see if I enjoy it. And um, the Keys of the Kingdom, starring Gregory Peck. All right, this came out in 1944, directed by John M. Stahl, and was produced by John L. Mankiewicz, who's a director that I collect. So this is about Gregory Peck going to China. He's a priest, and he ends up going to China. So I'm not sure. I haven't seen it. So and next up is there's Die Hard. There's the Steelbook DVD that I picked up with the other one, Live Free or Die Hard. I watched this last night, and still the greatest action film of all time, in my opinion. I mean, there are some that will blow you away, but this one is just friggin' awesome. This is such a good film. When I watched it, first time I watched it, I've been blown away by it. It's up there along with like Blade Runner of films that I've watched the most. Um, it's just such a great action film. All right, so that's Die Hard. Next up is Days of Darkness by Denis Arcand, or L'Âge des Ténèbres. All right. I have not seen this film, but I have it on DVD, and I haven't gotten to watch it yet. It's part of that group of films that he did with the barbarian invasions and the decline of the American Empire. Those good films, right? So he's one of the great French Canadian directors. I think he's Canadian, isn't he? Isn't he Quebecois? Anyways, sometimes I'll confuse French directors from France and Canadian, Quebecois or French language directors from Canada. I kind of mix them up sometimes. So anyway, so this is a Blu-ray DVD, so I can get rid of the DVD and save some space. And this is supposed to be a very good film as well. So, but I have not watched it yet. After that is one of the funniest films I've ever seen in my life, and um, it made me a fan of Colin Farrell. Um, a lot of the times, guys like Brad Pitt and George Clooney and these guys, that are good-looking guys, um, and they become actors. You don't give them a break because you think the reason why they're in these big films is because of the way that they look more than the way that they act. But um, just watch, I don't know, like California with a K with Brad Pitt, or uh, Snatch. Watch that with Brad Pitt in it, and some other of his films, and you'll see that he is a very good actor. I had that same prejudice against Colin Farrell until I watched this film. All right, and this film is a friggin' genius of a film. If you have not seen this film, watch it. It's like under the radar, great film. There's films that just go under the radar for a lot of people, and then they discover them later. Um, like this one. There's some other, but they're escaping my mind. I'll put it up here as another one that's um, a film about going to do wine tasting in wine country. It's an extremely good film as well, but can I remember the name of it? Anyways, that one was a surprise, blew me away film as well, right? So, but this one is funny. He plays a hitman. This is his boss. He's also with another gentleman, and they're in Bruges. And where is that? Is that in Belgium? I think it's in Belgium, isn't it? Um, yeah, in Belgium. And they're hiding out because they hit a target, and now they're hiding out, and you know they're bored, and he gets into some interesting things happening. Anyways, so it's quite funny if you have not seen it. Pick it up and watch it. It'll be worth your time. All right, and then I found The Lost City, a 2022 film starring Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum, kind of like older woman, younger guy kind of thing. And it's an action romantic comedy. I have not seen it, but I picked it up because it's a 4K, Ultra HD. And this will probably be the third one that's in my collection, but I don't think I'll keep it. I think I'll try to resell it. Um, because I don't have a 4K player, I can't really watch it. Eventually, I'll get a 4K player, 4K TV, but this is not a film that I would be looking forward to watching. So I'll probably jump on the popularity of 4Ks. People will buy 4Ks just because they're 4Ks, and I'll sell this for more than I bought it for, right? So I'll give me some extra money, all right? Then after that is 2014 Richard Linklater, Boyhood. This is an extremely interesting film because this boy, basically an actor or whatever, um, they go through his life in this film from the age of 6 till the age of 18, and Linklater filmed this film over, what was it, 2002 to 2011, something like that. It was like 9 year period that he filmed this film before he put it out, right? And it's got this damaged slipcover, which is kind of sad, but it's a Blu-ray DVD combo. So I have this film right now, just in DVD, so I can get rid of that and put this one instead, right? We'll put it inside. So basically, he starts at this age or this age. All right. Can you see this? Is this blocking? See what I mean? How much stuff I have? All right. And he gets up to that age. It's interesting watch to see you know an actor grow on film. You know what I mean? Linklater tapped into something there. Um, so I'll put it in protect it with a plastic. Right, and see what in a bit. All right. Next up after that is a 2007 film called Up the Yangtze. It's basically directed by Canadian Yong Chang, and it's basically about rural China coming into the modern age where the peasantry is going away and it's becoming more corporate or whatever, and they're starting to develop, you know, having corporate farms instead of private farms. And Young Chang documents it, right? So it's supposed to be Best Canadian Documentary Award at the Vancouver International Film Festival, Golden Gate Award, Best Documentary, and World Cinema Documentary Competition from the Sundance Film Festival. Anyways, it's supposed to be a really good film. So when I watch it, I'll watch it. All right. After that, I picked up Marley, which is basically Kevin McDonald's documentary on Bob Marley about his life. Um, I thought it'd be interesting because I really enjoy Bob Marley's music. Is this starting to get in the way of my face? I think so, right? So let's move this down. How's that? Is that better? All right. So I picked it up because I really enjoy Bob Marley's music, and I knew that you know he escaped. I don't know if you put it as escape, but he like vetoed or got the hell out of Jamaica because there was an attempt on his life, and he moved to London and did much of his music in London because of that shooting or whatever, right? So it'll be interesting to see what Kevin McDonald gives you about Marley's life, see if it's any good. All right, so, and then next up is a 2013 film called The Past, which is directed by Asghar Farhadi. And this is basically a French, Italian, Iranian collaboration, and it's supposed to be an extremely good film. But I only know it by reputation, so when I watch it, I'll know more. We're getting a little bit quicker here now, right? So, all right, next up is Night and Day, Cary Grant. This is basically a biopic of Cole Porter, the jazz player. Um, who's it directed by? I think it's directed by the guy who did Casablanca, Curtis. Martin Curtis? What's his Michael Curtis. So he did Casablanca, he did Sons of Liberty and Angels with Dirty Faces, which is one of my favorite James Cagney films. Um, but Casablanca is probably his greatest film. But let's see how he did with this film, which is basically a biopic of Cole Porter. All right, so that's Night and Day. Next up after that is a John Landis film. And I do collect John Landis as I do Michael Curtis. This is Three Amigos, all right, which is basically about these three entertainers who get called down to Mexico for a gig. Um, but, in their entertainment, they play these three gunfighters or whatever, right? Um, and the Mexicans of this village that are being terrorized at this village call them up to come protect their town, and they think it's a gig, like a performance, and then they realize that it's real life, and all shit hits the fan, right? So it's quite comical. And like I said, it's came out in 1986. It's one of those snapper cases, so I put it in plastic to protect the paper. Um, and it's directed by John Landis, the guy who did. Well, probably my favorite film by him is An American Werewolf in London. That is one of the great horror, probably the greatest werewolf film of all time, and one of the greatest horror films of all time because it's got a humor to it as well. Landis is known for his humor, right? So he did that one. He did Animal House. He did The Blues Brothers. He did Trading Places, and he did another fun horror film, but this one not about werewolves, but about um, vampires. It's called Innocent Blood, and I'm still looking for that one on Blu-ray. I don't even think I have it on DVD yet, but if I can find it, I'll pick it up. Innocent Blood. Have you seen that film? That is a really good film. I find it extremely good. It stars Anne Paquin. I'll put her name here. She's a French actress. She played in Nikita. The film Nikita by Luc Besson. Anyways, she plays a vampire in this who targets the Italian mob, and it's quite funny. All right, so anyway, so that's Innocent Blood. I'll put it up here, whatever I probably already did, right? So that's Three Amigos. All right, and then I ordered this online because it was such a reasonable price. And it's the limited edition steelbook of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on Blu-ray, and I couldn't pass it up. It was like less than $20, and I went, cool. It's a nice one of the great horror films of all time, 1974. A man and his chainsaw and his fucked up family, right? So anyway, so the Texas Chainsaw Massacre by Toby Hooper. All right. So I have a nice Blu-ray of that in my collection. Next up, I have two Disney films. I have The Little Mermaid and The Little Mermaid 2. I don't really have to explain The Little Mermaid to you. Everybody knows Disney and Pinocchio. So these are two more I add to my ever-growing Disney animated collection. All right. And then we have Foxcatcher, which I watched, and it's extremely good. And look at this gentleman. Does he look like Steve Carell to you? Well, that's Steve Carell. I watched half this movie, and I'm going, I know that voice from somewhere. Where have I heard that voice? And then it popped into me from The Office and other movies and everything, and I went, is that Steve Carell? So then I looked up on the IMDb on my phone, and it is. When I watched Foxcatcher for the first time, I have it on DVD. I don't have it on Blu-ray. I watch it, and I quite enjoy it. It's basically about two brothers who are wrestling champions. All right, um, it can be pretty intense as well. So 5 Academy Award nominations, but I don't think it won any of them. But it's a very good film, and you will not see Steve Carell in the same way as you do because most of his stuff is comedic stuff, right? Where he plays a bumbling idiot, right? So um, this he does not. All right. So and the last is this the last? It is the last um, Blu-ray is of Slapshot, probably the greatest hockey movie of all time, and it's the one of the funniest films about hockey of all time, starring Paul Newman. But these three guys, the Hanson brothers, are the ones that make this film because they're so dirty and underhanded, right, when they play. And the French Canadian goalie is quite hilarious in it as well. In fact, all the characters around Paul Newman are funnier than Paul Newman, but it's what makes the film so good, right? So if you haven't seen Slapshot and you like hockey, or even if you don't, if you like slapstick type of stuff, Um, watch Slapshot. It'll crack you up. All right, and that's everything. It looks like. Was it enough? Is there enough of it here? My goodness. Maybe I should. Maybe the opportunities that $800 allow you make you go a little bit crazy, and maybe I should slow down a bit. But even after buying all this stuff, I still have more than 500 of that dollar of it still in my bank account, right? So um, I know one thing I'm going to buy is um, the Blu-ray of Exotica from the Criterion Collection. I put it on my want list for my family for Christmas. So if I don't get it at Christmas, I'm definitely going to use some of the money I got from selling all those books and movies to get uh, Exotica on Blu-ray on the Criterion Collection, and maybe I'll also get Ghost Dog as well, because Ghost Dog is one of my all-time favorite films as well. Forrest Whitaker does not get enough accolades for his acting because he is such a good actor. All right, and Ghost Dog is probably his best film. Um, he's the guy from Last King of Scotland. He's the guy from Panic Room. Um, he even was as a young man. He was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Remember that film? He played the football player from the other school, and his brother and Spicoli wreck his new Trans Am. And no, he wasn't from the other school. He was from their school, and they blamed it on the other school. And then he took it out on the field and pretty much crushed every opponent football player on the field in the next game, right? So, anyways, he played a good character in that as well. But he came into his own. He was even in Bloodsport, the Jean Claude Van Damme uh, fighting film, Bloodsport. He was one of the cops chasing after Jean Claude Van Damme. Anyways, but yeah, he's a great actor. I really enjoy his stuff. And Ghost Dog has got to be his best film. It's an extremely good film. Criterion were right to add it to their collection. All right, so that's everything that I did today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm glad if you stuck around all the way to the end. If you liked it, leave a thumbs up. Think about joining my channel. I have more and more of these videos all the time. I do my CD library, my film library. I go through all the films, CDs I have, my records as well, and books as well. And so, if you like media, this is the channel to be on. And thank you for the comments that you leave. And I'll talk to you in my next video. All right? You have a good day, and bye for now.